I want to tell you a story about a man named Todd. I think it's Marinovich. Todd. Pretty sure it's Todd Marinovich. But I want to tell you a story about him. So let's for this, if I get his name wrong and you know this story, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure it's Todd. When Todd, Todd's dad, when Todd was a baby, Todd's father's entire dream for Todd was that Todd was going to grow up to be a star quarterback. In fact, the dad had two sons, and he was determined that both of his sons were going to be star NFL quarterback football players. So he had this story, he had this attachment to his sons being this way. So when Todd, the first one, was born, he started, literally, no joke, weight training him as a little baby. Like, he'd put these little baby footballs in his conditioning him right in the crib, so that he would like lift his little arm up to do little weight training. He would sleep with footballs. His entire life was football. And as soon as he was old enough, he would start playing football. Everything was football. And there are like pictures of Todd when he was a little boy, like at 6, and he was like a little buff little boy, like muscles, because his dad conditioned him, constantly conditioned him, that you are going to be a star football player. So the dad had this attachment and story that life would not be okay unless his son Todd became an NFL quarterback football player. So cut to, guess what happened? Todd became an NFL star quarterback. And I think, if I remember the story correctly, he was one of the best ones in the league. But the story began to unravel pretty quickly a few years into his career as a football player, because he started using drugs. And I actually think he went to prison too. I'm not sure, but he definitely got kicked off the NFL, and he became a hot mess. So everything, all of the conditioning that his dad had created for Todd, began to unravel. Today, I'll give you the end of the story. Today, Todd is in recovery, and he's an artist, and he paints. So his true self, his true way of being, was art, not football, but art. But instead, he was born into a family with a father who was absolutely beyond obsessed with football, that he conditioned his son to become something that he didn't want to become. So the reason I want to share this with you, this is a very severe story. In fact, this is a story of child abuse. I mean, the dad made his son do everything around football. The son, Todd, was not able to form his own identity. It was only the identity that his dad had created for him. It was only the story that his dad had created for him. You know that movie, The Breakfast Club, and one of the characters is a jock, and he breaks down and he's like, my dad just won't let me up. He won't, all I got to do is win. He was a wrestler in the movie. I got to do is win. And if he's constantly telling me, if I don't win, I'm a loser. So the amount of programming that went into this kid, Todd, from a very early age, you could even find pictures on the internet with him in his crib with this little baby football, it's incredible. It's incredible. And he couldn't take it anymore. And like I said, he started doing drugs, and it all unraveled. So here's what I want to share with you, is that this is not uncommon. And in fact, it's common, not at this extreme level, but all of us, when we were born into a family system, or I shouldn't say all of us, most of us, our family put some sort of expectation or story on us. Our teachers put some sort of story and expectation on us. Everything in the school system, and we're seeing it more now, it's starting to come out, there's people are using the words programming when it's coming to school, or brainwashing the kids. Homeschooling is at a high. A lot of people are homeschooling their kids because they don't want their kids to be brainwashed about what is being taught in the schools. And there's so many things that are being taught that people aren't aligned with. Now that's extreme, that's programming, right? That's programming. These are stories that adults are telling children, stories that adults are telling children, even the things in the history books, right? Why do they choose those particular stories to teach on? So we could talk about that. It's probably a whole other video. But as far as like how people saw you, how you saw yourself, and how that has led to where you are today. And in the spiritual warrior, as a spiritual warrior in the community, one of my intentions is to support you, support myself, and to support the community on releasing and letting go of any programming that is keeping you from being who you are. Now, Todd became an addict, but that happens a lot too, where we don't know who we are. We feel lost. We know we're playing a role. So you may not become an addict, but people maybe check out with wine, and you can have wine and not be an addict, or watch too much TV, or work too much, or there's lots of other ways to fill that gap where you're out of alignment with your soul. So here's what I want to leave you with, is to begin asking yourself questions about the stories that you are making up about yourself. And then you can go a little bit deeper and a little bit further in and ask yourself, what stories did my caregivers, my parents, the people that raised me make up about me that I'm living into? What stories have I made up about money? This is something we worked on in the Spiritual Warrior group today. What stories have I made up about money? What programming is in my being that I get to release that is not aligned with my true self, that actually may be causing me to disconnect in some way? So one of the stories people said about me was, I was a space cadet. I was a mess. I wasn't good at school. All of those things were actually true. I was a space cadet. I was kind of a mess, and I wasn't good in school. But the more people said that, the more I stepped into that role. It's like, well, if they're going to see me this way, I might as well be that. And no one that actually looked at what's the real story here. Why is this vibrant girl a mess? Because my home life was a mess. My home life was so dysfunctional that I was basically just surviving at school. So as I was surviving at school, I didn't know how to connect. I was constantly in breakdown. I was constantly I was just a mess. But instead, no one got curious around I was a mess and just labeled me a space cadet. I even had one teacher make me a crown that said Queen of Outer Space. And I was like, that's me, I'm a Queen of Outer Space. And I fell right into that role. And I still have to watch myself. I can get triggered if someone calls me spacey or just that kind of thing. And the thing is I am a little bit, I'm not that spacey. I choose to be spacey around some things, but I have a lot going on in my multidimensional world, and it's managing it all. But sometimes I can still fall into that role, and it does not feel good when someone projects that back onto me. So here's what I want to leave you with. Begin asking yourself, what stories am I making up about myself? What stories have been made up about me when I was a kid that are rolling over into me today? And what projections? What are the projections that I'm making up about other people? Big. I project shit all the time with my daughter because I'm so concerned that I want her to be okay, which is a little bit on the neurotic side sometimes. Is she okay? Is she okay? Is she okay? That I'm projecting all over her that she's not okay when she really is. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a game that we can play. And here's one more thing, and then I'm going to finally wrap up. One more thing. The stories we make up also create the reaction sometimes with people. So for example, let's say you've made up a story that someone's mad at you. You have no evidence that someone's mad at you, but you've made up a story that they're mad at you. Maybe they didn't text you back or something. You're they're mad at me or they don't like me. And it might be they just missed your text or they're really, really busy. But you've made up this story that they're mad at you because they haven't texted you back. So when you do talk to them, you're in reaction to them from the story that you made up. You see what I mean? And then you're in a whole like breakdown story. So one thing I like to say, if I do feel like I'm in a story about someone and I've got my feelings hurt, this is something I do. I'll go to them and say, the story I've made up is, could you support me? The story I made up is I don't matter in your life because you haven't written me back in 3 days. Could we talk about that story? Is that a real story or is that a story I'm making up? And so when you come to someone and say, about the story that I'm in is, you're being responsible. You're not blaming, you're not in reaction. You're like, I'm responsible for my perceptions and I'm responsible for my feelings. And I want to share this with you. And it takes the weight out of it. So if you're in, partnership or something like that, the story I'm making up is, you don't really want to have sex with me that much, or whatever the case may be. The story I'm making up is that you don't care enough about me to clean up after yourself. That's the story I'm in. You see how much more powerful and effective that is than you. So play with it this week, play with it. And then go check out that story of Todd Markovich. I'll put it in the email when I write this email. It's fascinating. I've really I'm so fascinated by stuff like that, because of the human nature. And then what made the dad so obsessed about football? I mean, what was that about? Like, we could go on and on and on. Like, well, how was his dad with him that or maybe he wanted to be a star football player and he didn't make it. And so he was trying to live through his own kids. That's probably it. If I had to guess, that would be it. All right. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Beth Osmer, and I will see you on the next video.